got, it's heading up towards 30 online. I'm Simon Shepherd, head of ITS, and been around for quite a number of years. I've seen Robin join us and progress through to professor, but just as usual, I'll give a bit of background. So Robin is a geographer, an environmental scientist by training, having done an undergraduate in geography at the University of Bristol and a master's at the University of York, where he won a funded scholarship on their environmental science and management course. Robin completed his PhD at the Doctoral Training Centre in Energy Futures at the University of Sheffield, where he got bitten by the transport bug. His thesis was titled The Energy Costs of Commuting, a Spatial Microsimulation Approach. After that, Robin joined the University of Leeds in 2013 and the Institute for Transport Studies in 2016 as a University Academic Fellow in Transport and Big Data. He's developed into a leading expert in transport data science and has always focused on open research, which can be used in practice and which will have an impact. He became the lead developer of the National Propensity to Cycle tool, which led to a REF impact case study. He won a fellowship to work alongside the data science team at number 10 Downing Street, and he assures me he wasn't at the lockdown parties. He then worked part-time for Active Travel England, helping them to develop a data and digital capacity. He's now back 100% with ITS, leading projects to improve cycle infrastructure in Scotland and Portugal. So really, thanks to Robin, and we look forward to a really interesting seminar or lecture.
Amazing. Hey. Thanks, Simon. Thank you, everyone who's turned up. It's great to see so many faces, including my family's come up from Hereford. And yeah, this is a big day for me. It's a chance for me to finally tell people what I actually do at work. And outside of academia, I think basically no one knows. I do stuff with computers and transport and data. So this is my chance to say what I actually do, hopefully. The other thing to say at the beginning, I think, is massive thanks to the Institute for Transport Studies in general for creating a home for me to do my work and also specifically for organising this event. I joked to Liam that it felt like doing the wedding organising all over again. And if that's the case, Liam was the wedding organiser and Simon was the celebrant. So thanks. And to continue that metaphor perhaps a bit too far, maybe I'm getting married to ITS, so I don't know what I'm letting myself in for here. But yeah, I'm going to talk about data science for future-proof transport planning. I'll come on to what I mean by that a little bit, but the first thing to say is it probably should have data science or something about data in the title, because that is my new job title, Professor of Transport Data Science. And the first thing that people say is like, what does that actually mean? So I'm going to have a stab at defining what it is that I do. I'm going to provide a few kind of case studies and concrete examples to show what I do. And I'm also going to talk, I'm not going to dwell too much on the past. I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that I'd like to do in the future as well. And my aim is to finish within the hour to leave some time for questions, and so we can have a bit of a conversation as well. So I think I've given a bit of an overview of the planned contents for this talk, basically in three parts: past, present, and future. And this is my inaugural lecture, so if ever I've got a chance to talk a little bit about my journey and where I'm from, this is it, especially because mum and dad are here as well. So I'm going to take the liberty of talking a bit about where I'm from. So in data form on a map, this is a visualization of where I'm from and where I am currently. So I started out in Hereford, born and bred in the West Midlands. Then I went down further south to Bristol to do an undergraduate. And then I did a year out in Spain, which was a really amazing experience that definitely generated lots of ideas and made me want to do more international stuff. And then since then, I've basically been knocking around in the north of England and have ended up here in Leeds. And so that's a bit of an overview of my trajectory on a map. If we zoom into where I'm actually from, we can see where it is that I grew up. So it's hard to know how far to go back when you're talking about the past. And you'll be happy to know that I'm not going all the way back to 1932, which is when that photo was taken. But thanks to my dad, that's the oldest photo that he could find of the village where I grew up. And as you can see, it's very remote. So there's not much going on there. And I had a lot of time to think and play outside. And I think that plays a big part, a big role in who I am. And this is the house now that I grew up in. And I want to say thanks to my dad and mum and everyone for not only metaphorically creating a safe and stable foundation for me to grow up in, but physically building the house. It took my dad about 5 years to go from this house, which was derelict when at the time that they bought it, and eventually built the house that I grew up in. So zooming in again into the map view, Pool Cottage, as it's called, is kind of in the middle of the map. And you can see there that in terms of places that people know, Hereford is a small city with about 50,000 people. So it's less than 1/10 the size of Leeds. I went to Webley High School, which is just up here. And Pool Cottage is kind of in the middle of nowhere between these towns with Hay-on-Wye and Leominster. And Hay-on-Wye is kind of famous because they do a book festival. I worked in the leisure centre at Leominster Leisure Centre, and I went to sixth form college in Hereford. So that's where I'm from. I went to university in Bristol. The options were Bristol or Edinburgh, and I chose Bristol after a 6-hour car drive with my dad, which I hated, and I never wanted to repeat that again. So maybe there's something about my preferences for transport there. And also Bristol offered geography with a year's study in continental Europe. I was really big into traveling. I'd grown up in quite a sheltered countryside environment, so I wanted to see the world. And the fact that Bristol offered that year in another country was a big incentive for me to study, to be honest. So the way that they did that degree was if you got good enough grades, you got to go to Spain. And that was honestly like the #1 motivation for me wanting to do the studies. And I did an Erasmus year, which is, it was pre-Brexit, an EU-wide project where students go to another country for a bit. And it was an amazing experience. I lived in a city called Salamanca, and I decided to take subjects that I'd never really thought about before. So that just opened my mind to a lot of things. It really gave me interest in environmentalism as well. So it made me want to try and contribute something back to the world when I was in Spain. So then I got, as Simon mentioned, a master's degree, a master's fellowship at the University of York to study environmental science and management. And I did my master's there. And to be honest, that year was fairly focused on studies. It was probably the hardest year of my life in many ways because there was just so much work to do. It was quite isolating for me being from the south and then suddenly moving up to York. But I became very interested in certain things when I was there. So probably spent too much time in the library. I got very interested in energy and sustainable energy. So some of my big influences around that time is the book on the left, Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air by David Mackay. And he had a way of communicating about the energy problem that was super accessible. He spoke in plain English. Whereas at the time I was reading a lot of papers and it was just impossible to understand. So that was a big motivation. And interestingly, with David Mackay, he actually went into government and tried to help out when they were looking at the decarbonisation policy. I was also kind of into peak oil and like the the fact that we're running out of oil, or people thought we were back in 2009. And I was an avid reader of the Oil Drum, which is kind of like a very niche peak oil blog. And I even contributed to that blog. So fast forward to 2009, I got a PhD offer at Sheffield and decided it would be a good place to go. So this was my interest in energy, took me to Sheffield because they were a university that had this multidisciplinary PhD option called the Energy Futures Doctoral Training Centre. So that was also a big learning curve for me because as a social scientist, as a geographer, I had always been around a certain group of people, had a certain way of thinking, but Sheffield, this doctoral training centre was 90% physicists, chemists and engineers. And to be honest, I loved it. I found it amazing and inspiring to see a totally different way of thinking about things. There was like, in a way, less conversation, more doing. And I found the approach of focusing on the numbers and trying to work things out from first principles really fascinating. While I was in Sheffield, I got really involved in Engineers Without Borders as well. So the practical side of it, I found really inspiring. So Engineers Without Borders is a group that tries to make engineering for social benefit. And that was a big part of my life when I lived in Sheffield. So I think something that really benefited me was being involved in building stuff, like physically building things. And I think that's really helped with my project management and seeing a project to completion. So one example of that is the wind turbine project. So we built a wind turbine. It's called a Hugh Pigott wind turbine with 2.4 meter diameter. And we built it basically from scratch. And it was an amazing group of people, and it was amazing working with engineers. And to be honest, it was inspiring to show what you can do if you put your mind to something and focus on things. So you'll notice that there's not much transport in there. So to be honest, I wasn't really that interested in transport research. But one thing that I was interested in was biking. And I found biking inspiring. And it was basically my outlet of, I just loved going for trips into the Peak District. And I also helped out with a community organisation called Abundance Sheffield, literally transporting fruit through bike-powered means. So that kind of got me interested in transport. And I ended up doing a PhD in energy and transport. And there's a little pause there because for anyone who's kind of wondering what they're doing or struggling, I should say that I actually failed the first year of my PhD. I was planning to do something totally different and it ended up not working. And I had to go right back to the drawing board, pick myself up again and find a topic that worked. And as it happened, and this links to the policy stuff that I'll talk about in a bit, I had done a placement with Sheffield City Council and I found that really interesting. And I did that on transport. So that's how I got bitten by the transport bug. In any case, the thesis was on the energy cost of commuting. So really simple question, how much energy do we use to get to work and back? And then an incredibly complicated methodology to do that, which is how I got into the data science and the programming. So one of the figures from this figure didn't actually happen. This was kind of me hoping that, oh, well, if we had the perfect data set, we could model things in such amazing detail, we would know exactly how much energy, but we're just estimating. We have to have ranges for things. And but that was the kind of holy grail of getting to this level. And without going into too much detail, you've got a person ID, you've got the number of trips they take, you've got a vehicle ID, and each person is linked to a vehicle. And then you've got all the other factors, like what mode of travel do they use to get to work, mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, different distances. And you add all these things up, including topography, and you get a very precise measure of how much energy you could use. I thought, well, we're never going to get to that level of detail. So the next best thing that we can do is just simulate individuals and see how much energy that they could use with the best available data that we've got. And there's two things to say there. So one of them is that now I think we're getting closer to having this level of data. So it's not infeasible to be able to simulate at this level of detail. And in fact, Hussein Mahfouz, who's in the audience, is doing a PhD using simulation software called MatSim that is going to that level where you simulate individual vehicles moving around, and you can scale that up. And that's also thanks to improvements in computing power. The other thing to say is that I decided that this level of detail wasn't helpful if you want to have impact in the world. It was just too much information. And the problem with trying to simulate things at this level of detail at that time, one of them is that it's really hard and it slows you down. And the other one is the computational requirements mean that you can only do a simulation for like a small area, maybe a big city if you're lucky. But at that time, I realized that if I was going to have policy impact, it had to scale, it had to go big, and it had to work nationally. And there was no way at that time that this could scale nationally. So I finished my PhD, I passed the Viva, thankfully, and I got my first full-time proper job, I would say, in Leeds. So this is part two. And as I said at the beginning, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the past. I want to talk about the future and the present as well. But yeah, I moved to Leeds in 2013. This photo is taken with my wife, Katie, in 2021. And I've established a home for myself in Leeds. I feel very happy here. It's a great university that's got many of the things I like about academia, including real world impact, which is something that Simon talked about. So it encourages the kind of real world impact that drives me. So yeah, I got my first job, and massive thanks to Mark Birkin, who was my first boss, I guess, at the University of Leeds. He had a project that was about using new methods to make use of emerging data sets. And it was around that time that you had this big boom in social media. So we could access back then loads of kind of uncensored social media posts. It'd be impossible today, but basically Twitter and some of the other companies were just like giving you a fire hose of data that was like non-anonymous and had locations on it. So this was NCRM, the National Centre for Research Methods. And the idea was to feed that data into models. So this is one of the examples of the kind of thing that I worked on. And it was training a spatial interaction model based on this data. So the methods were super interesting, but the actual area of application and the policy relevance of this work was, to be honest, questionable. So this was looking at movements to museums. And yes, I think museums are interesting, but it wasn't kind of world changing. And to be honest, I wasn't driven by the end product. And again, this is another lesson. The paper wasn't ever actually published. It was put online as a preprint, and it's had a few citations. But I got interested in other things, which is what I'm going to talk about next. So I mentioned that I'm interested in cycling. This was like part of my kind of life outside of work. And as it happens, I ended up doing some work for Cycling UK, which at the time was called the Cycling Touring Club. And at the time, they were trying to model the potential health benefits of cycling. So as far as I remember, I just did this work kind of on the side as like citizen contributions out of personal interest. And one of the graphs from that work just shows the level of ambition that they had. So back in the day, and I'm sure there's some people in this room who will remember, there was the cycling delivery plan, which had targets for getting to a certain level of cycling by 2050. So it was back then quite ambitious. And I was tasked with modeling that using my data science skills. And I found that really interesting. Basically, I found something that I was genuinely interested in that aligned with my skill sets. So I set about creating these models, and the output was an estimate of the health benefits of meeting different scenarios. So what was really good, unlike my PhD thesis, this work, even though it was relatively small scale, actually had a real world impact. I think some of it got picked up by newspapers. It certainly got picked up by Cycling UK, and they used this to lobby the government to make policy change. And I found that really exciting. And that was really something that started to drive me. So Simon's already mentioned the propensity cycle tool. For people who don't know, this was a project to help evidence-based transport planning. And the way that it came about actually was that some of my links from the cycling work that I'd done picked up on the fact that the Department for Transport had commissioned a piece of work to look at the propensity to cycle. And as a lowly PhD student and then postdoc, I thought there's no chance of me doing this work. But what I did is I just started emailing people, including James Woodcock at the University of Cambridge and Rachel Aldred and Anna Goodman. And thanks to those people, we managed to put together a team. We linked up with a consultancy, and we put what we thought was an unlikely bid into the Department for Transport. And to our surprise, we actually won the bid, and I found myself in the position of being the lead developer of a national transport tool. So that wasn't supposed to happen. I was not expecting to win that, to the point where I didn't even tell my boss at the time, Mark Birkin, that we'd put in this bid. So it was almost like the case was that first day of work, I arrive and I said, yeah, I've got something to say. I've accidentally been bought out 100% of my time for the next 3 months, sorry. Thankfully, Mark was really agreeable, and he was genuinely interested, and he was like, well, as long as there's revenue coming in, we can use that for something else, and I can see you're interested in that. Another lesson from that project was that the Department for Transport asked for something quite specific. They wanted a very detailed market segmentation model, and we realized that what was needed was a map-based tool, and we kind of reinterpreted the brief and said, what you actually want is a map-based tool that shows you where the potential is on a map. Professor John Parkin, who's also in the audience, has done did his PhD here in cycling potential, and there's an amazing link there that I've only become aware of since then, that there's still a lot of work to do in this area. So that was really my big break in academia, and it came about through following something that was outside of my main job, I guess. So yeah, that meant that we did the research. The Department for Transport liked what they were seeing, and they decided to take it forward and deploy it as a national tool. So at that point, I realized that I would have to change my mindset from being an academic to basically a web developer or a digital tool developer. And that was a bit of a scary experience. But luckily, I think my experience working with engineers at the University of Sheffield helped with that. And Nikolai Burkhoff, who's also in the audience, who actually is a web developer, massively helped with that. So we hired him as an independent web developer, and we worked together as a team. And again, we got the tool to the point where it was launched nationally, and it had quite a big impact. So this is a photo that I've put on my slides previously, so apologies if people have seen it before, but this is me presenting the tool to the Secretary of State for Transport at that time. And it was a good time to present the tool to him because they were just finalizing the wording of the policy for cycling, which was called the Cycling and Walking Investment Strategy. And the tool was mentioned in that report. And basically all of the local authorities in England and Wales were told to use this tool. So I went from having basically zero impact in my PhD, but always wanting to have the impact, to having tons of impact thanks to that project. And that led to a 4-star ref impact case study, which again, for people who aren't in academia, it takes up a huge amount of time where people have to explain the societal impact of their work, and people complain about it. But I would like to say credit to REF, the Research Excellence Framework, for trying to evaluate it, because it helps people who are genuinely having impact to report on it. So I think that trajectory and that journey was what led me to do this internship. I was very interested in policy. I always wanted to have an impact. And when I saw that they were advertising for a fellowship inside the data science team in number 10, obviously I was going to apply. So I applied for that. I had to do a exam and answer some data science questions, which I passed. And then I was hired to work on this team. It was a really interesting time because just before it started, you had COVID lockdowns. So there wasn't that much in person. I did go to number 10 Downing Street twice. And unfortunately, I missed the opportunity to get a photo with me at the door of number 10. If I had that, obviously, I'd put that on this slide. But instead, I can show you 2 maps of England. This just shows one of the things that I did while I was embedded in the data science team in number 10. And myself and Federico Botta, who was the other fellow, in the other person who had this fellowship, we ended up writing some code and we packaged it that made this data that's presented on the map much more accessible. So that was a really good output from that. So from there, I was working in this fellowship in number 10. I was going to quite a lot of policy events, including in the Department for Transport. And it was at one of those that I met, there was a meeting where John Parkin and Danny Williams was, and he was just in the process of setting up this new government body called Active Travel England. And it seemed to me and him that they had a big gap in their team, which was the data area. So he basically said to me, can you be the data guy for Active Travel England? And of course, this being about active travel and impact, I said yes. So it was a bit complicated because I was already doing a secondment into number 10, but basically I ended up doing a sub-secondment from number 10 into Active Travel England. So officially, I was working 2 days per week in Active Travel England as their interim director of data and analysis, 2 days a week in the data science team in number 10, and then 1 day a week at the University of Leeds. But in the end, in reality, I went all in on Active Travel England. I found it absolutely fascinating to work in government, and to be building a team was super exciting. And that was, I would say, my number one job was to build a team. And I'm very happy to say I did build that team. I interviewed everyone on the data and digital team, and Active Travel England has an amazing team and group of people working in this area. And they've also, as I'll talk about in a subsequent slide, published and completed some impressive projects. So that was a big inspiring part of what I was doing. And this job grew to the point where Danny said, I don't want you to do this job just as a secondment. I want you to be a paid up employee in the civil service so you can be involved. So I ended up doing a 2-year contract with the civil service. And that was a bit of a career break from academia. And I learned so much through that process. So from one live demo to a politician to another, this is Jesse Norman, who at the time was the minister responsible for active travel. And I don't know if you can see it on the map, but he's the MP for Hereford. And we're actually doing a live demo where he's pointing at central Hereford and drawing a new route into town. And I think that image encapsulates my belief that digital tools, especially open digital tools, can really have an impact. And I don't think that path that he was pointing out actually got built, but it was very useful in building the political support needed for the good infrastructure that we need. So that was just a prototype. I'm very happy to say that some of that work that I was involved in is now published. It's available online. And I'm sure some people from Active Travel England who are here can attest that this stuff is actually being used for real. So this is deployed on a gov.uk website, and you can use it to look at a huge amount of data related to active travel. And you can even use it to design your own active travel schemes. So again, you've got the citizen science. It's empowering people to do their own designs. And if I get time and I speed up a bit, I might even have time to do a live demo of that. And many people don't know about it, to be honest. I think Active Travel England could promote this a bit more, but if anyone's interested, the URL is plan.activetravelengland.gov.uk, and they've got a really great web tool there that you can use. So apologies for rambling about the past. Let's talk a bit about the present. So the Active Travel England job was a 2-year contract, which I completed in December 2024. And that meant that in January 2025 until now, I'm back in my comfort zone, full-time academic. Also, as shown in this photo, I'm happy to say that we have an amazing family who is in the audience, and my 3-year-old's definitely enjoying it based on the babbling that I'm hearing from this corner of the room. So yeah, this is my present, and yeah, we've got 2 children and I just wanted to say massive thanks to Katie, my wife, Kit for mostly being good and quiet and listening to this lecture, and baby Rosa. So there's and this photo shows that they're also interested in transport planning, especially sustainable transport. And I use Kit to do and Rosa to do experiments of how young can you get a child into a bike trailer and it's still safe. Me and Katie may disagree on the finer points of that one. Okay, so yeah, my current role is I'm a professor of transport data science. I hope to define what I mean by that, by transport data science. I do want to continue to focus on high impact research. Teaching is a big part of what I do. I really love passing information on, and I believe in the saying that information that's not shared dies. So you have to keep sharing that information to keep it alive. I'm in the academic game, so in this industry, there are constraints like any other, and here the game is you have to get grant funding. So I intend to play that game and succeed at it, to bring in grant funding to build a team and to build the financial sustainability we need to do world-class research in this space. I don't want to end up one of these things, which are ivory towers. So the metaphor being that you just kind of become disconnected from the real world and just write loads of papers and don't engage with people. So I think this event hopefully is a good chance to show that. And it's great that it's open to the public. And it's great to see some non-academics in the audience as well. So thanks everyone for coming. So this gets onto the question of my job's professor of transport data science. What actually is transport data science? And I think that's easy. It's data science applied to transport, right? So I think the harder question is, what is data science? And what's really interesting, this is something that I learned just within the last year, is the whole term data science came out of industry. It was people working for Facebook and the big tech companies coined the phrase data science. And there was this article in the Harvard Business Review, which is like a business magazine, called Data Scientist, the Sexiest Job of the 21st Century. It's definitely not that. It mostly involves cleaning horrible data sets and spending hours in front of a computer. But this article got loads of attention. And what I found a little bit shocking about their definition is that it was all about making more money. It was like optimize service contracts and maintenance intervals for industrial products. That was the kind of example that they had. So I realized that in a way, academia was like catching up to industry. And I think we have some work to do to kind of redefine data science. I don't accept that definition of data science. And I'm definitely in favour of, redefining it and as something a bit more positive and interesting. So another way of defining it is basically like a combination of different fields. So data science equals discipline A plus discipline B, statistics plus machine learning, or statistics plus computing plus communication plus sociology plus management. You could just keep adding different things onto that definition depending on what you're interested in. But I think we can do slightly better than that. So this is my definition of transport data science. Okay, so bear with me. I define transport data science as a discipline that allows you to transform raw data into understanding, insight, and knowledge. So it's about what you do with the data, adding value to it, not the methods of how you do that. And I think that's shows that it's a practical discipline. It's not just theoretical. And then I've added this bit. So some other people wrote this part. I've added onto it with reproducible and therefore falsifiable scientific and scalable code. So I believe that if you're doing data science, you have to write code because that's the only way to make it fully reproducible and able to scale and be scientific. And then this is the transport bit for a deeper understanding of and more evidence-based interventions in transport systems. So that is my definition of transport data science that I dreamt up today. Hopefully people like it. I should probably write a paper on it. So for any academics out there, this is definitely something that I'm a big fan of. I advocate for reproducible data science and reproducible methods. There's an image down there that shows that it's a continuum. It's not like you're fully reproducible, you're good, or you're fully not reproducible, you're bad. Everyone is somewhere on that spectrum. And there are many things that you can do to make your research more reproducible. And two of the key ones there are making the code available. So just publishing the code somewhere and checking it for reproducibility. And the good news is that according to this study, if you do that, your work is more likely to be cited. And that I've certainly found that to be the case for my work. So yeah, this is my list of the benefits of reproducibility. Scientific rigor, benefits to your future self. So if you do a project and then you want to go back to a data set, you've got all of the code there. Benefits to others, which is just good in itself. You're helping other people and you're massively increasing your potential for impact. The other question that people sometimes ask is like, well, why would I do that? Because of X. And there's always an excuse. So this is roughly in order of how legitimate your excuse is. So if you don't have enough time, yes, that's a fair excuse because it does take a bit of time. Although it can, if you do it well and you learn that workflow, save you time in the future. Lack of know-how, yeah, fair enough, but you can skill up and that's a benefit to you if you learn these techniques. Lack of permission, that is also a good excuse. So especially people who work in industry don't always have permission to publish any code, let alone all of the code. So that's definitely a defensible reason. But again, there are ways that there's always part of what you're doing that could be open if you don't publish, even if you don't publish like the secret source of what you're doing. The data is not open access. Someone might use it in an unethical way. I don't really think that's particularly defensible because there's so much stuff out there that people can use. And if you state at the beginning of your piece of code, this is for sustainable transport planning, or this is for this good purpose, it's hard to imagine that someone's going to use it for something like building a nuclear bomb, for example. And then someone might steal the work. I think that's the least defensible. And I could talk about why, but I would like to move on. I've got one example of fully reproducible research there, which links to the international side of my work and my international interests. But I'm not going to talk about it in detail. But basically, this is an example of how to work and collaborate with people internationally to build something that can save people collectively hundreds of hours and lead to better research. So in a way, this is a plug to the Spanish OD data package. And full credit there to Egor Kotov, who's the lead developer of that package. Yeah, so I'm moving towards the end of the presentation. I want to get to the future, but one thing that I want to talk about is being open source in itself isn't necessarily enough. If you put all your code out there, but no one knows how to use it, what's the point? So it needs to be accessible, and you need to work to explain to people in plain English what it is you're doing and how to use it. And there's a nice quote in there by myself and John Parkin, who's in the audience, that it goes beyond open source, and it's about making it accessible for people to use. And the best way to do that in the 21st century, everyone's online, is actually to build a web application. So I think I'm planning to do another piece of work to talk about the 5 stages of reproducible research, and the final stage is to publish it as an online web application. So that's the past and present. What about the future? What am I going to do next? I mean, I'm in an amazingly privileged position. I'm super thankful to ITS and the University of Leeds for supporting me to get to this place. And with Kit growing up and having 2 kids, I'm definitely thinking more about the future. So Kit, in fact, this is a photo of Kit from just a few days ago. He's learned to ride a bike without stabilizers. So I thought that would be a good photo to talk about the future and think about what I want to do next. And there is a live demo, but I'm not going to show that now. So in terms of what can I do that's different? So there's a few principles here. We could make the code run faster, and that is good in a way because it can be more efficient, it can save energy, it can save hassle, and it also means you can do it for bigger areas. And there's a huge amount of work that we can do to optimize these processes, given that the original propensity cycle tool took about a week to build nationally. I think we can make the research much more accessible, and that could be gamified. And I really like the idea of gamification of transport planning, which basically means that it's fun to use. If you look at game developers, they're always focusing on how to make it like addictive, whereas some of the transport planning tools are just horrible to use. So let's try and make them a bit more user-friendly. And there's huge progress in that area. More open and reproducible, higher resolution. So a lot of what I've done is quite low resolution. And unfortunately, that's not great for walking, which is a really important aspect of sustainable transport. So I think there's work to be done in terms of higher resolution. And the one that I put last, which could be the most important, is we need to be bolder in what we're doing as academics, because government and industry doesn't have the incentives to be bold in their modeling and their research. And I've got a really great example here of what I think is a bold transport model. So the bottom image and the second from the left shows a transport model developed by Kai Axhausen and colleagues in Zurich, which models 50% of road space being reallocated for active travel. That is a big change, and it's possible to do that. And I just think that's amazing to see that ambition, but modeled in great detail. So that's the kind of work that I would like to do. And there is work like this already happening. So I'd like to make a plug for the low traffic neighborhood design tool that is developed by Dustin Carlino. And he now has a company called AB Street Limited. It's a fully free and open tool, and it allows you, anyone, to become a transport planner and imagine a safer neighborhood where you live. I'd like to make a plug for Kai Axhausen actually doing a talk in ITS. This is a bit of a coincidence because I saw him talk on YouTube, and I thought it was really inspiring. And he's actually coming to ITS. So there's a talk on the 15th of July, 2025, if anyone would like to see that. I don't actually know if it's public, open to the public, but hopefully we can arrange if anyone would like to come and see that. So there's some plugs. Final thing, I've just got 3 quick ideas I'm just going to put out there of things I would like to do next. So one of them, I'm calling it Active Count, and it's based on the fact that there is actually a web application and a project, a digital project, to crowdsource counts of walking, cycling, motor traffic worldwide, and this is called TELRAM. So I plan to put together a funding bid to roll out this technology at scale in the UK to lead to a step change in the data available on what works for walking and cycling. That's idea one. Idea two, this is actually linked to a failure. So I've stood up in a conference when I was working at Active Travel England, and I promised that the school routes project would be finished by the end of 2024. Here we are in 2025. Sorry, guys, it's not done. But I believe there's a need for specifically better data on travel to school. And this is my friend's daughter cycling to her nursery, age 4, which is really impressive. Luckily, they're lucky that they're actually in one of the safer places in the UK where they can mostly go on pavements and then get onto a park. But where I live, I wouldn't feel comfortable with my children doing that. So there's a big need for the next generation focusing on safe travel for young people. And idea 3 is more about the scalability of the work. So generating networks with better information, not just for one country or 5 countries, but worldwide. And it's good to think big. So I do have a kind of call to action. So for anyone interested in getting involved in this space, there's loads you can do. When I got involved like 10 years ago, it was like email servers. It was really hard to engage. Now there's entire communities to get involved. So anyone can sign up to get a GitHub account. That's where most open source software lives. And in the age of social media, it is addictive. And I'd say GitHub is the most addictive social media site. I use it as, I've met people through it, and it's like Facebook, but it's actually useful and has lots of open source code on it. You can ask questions about data sets and digital tools. So if you see a digital tool, don't think like, oh, that's above me, I can't engage with it. Just start emailing people, ask questions, get in contact with them, and be annoying is my advice there. Develop and share ideas. And if you're not a developer, you can find bugs. You can call out the things that the tools are doing wrong, and then think of a constructive way of thinking of resolving it. So final plug, if you really want to get into this space and you'd like to learn more, I'm doing a 2-day course at the Institute for Transport Studies on data science for transport planning. And everyone would be welcome to come, especially if you're working in industry, if you're having impact or you'd like to have more impact. That will be a deep dive into general data science techniques. So that's a final plug. And the final thing to say is massive thank you to everyone. It's been an incredible journey to my family who've supported me throughout, and Katie especially, and to everyone who's been part of this journey. Many of you are in the audience, many people are online, and I've got a big responsibility to live up to, and thank you again for listening.
You have to cycle lane to Pool Cottage, the sports centre, but never mind, you can keep trying. So any questions for Robbie? All right. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot, Wayne. And just for anyone online who didn't hear, Wayne's my neighbour, and he asked if I were to change anything around where we live, Chapeltown area, what would it be? So I've actually got an answer to that. So, and this, yeah, it's a good question. And I've got it in the slide, to be honest. So this is actually, I don't know if you saw this, Wayne, but this image shows that this part of Chapeltown. So this is Chapeltown Road. We live on the east side of it, and there's boy races, there's like fast moving cars, and it's, yeah, you're dicing with death if you take your child there. We wouldn't dare let Kit cycle to nursery at the moment, and understandably, most parents are hesitant to let their kids go on bikes outside of the house. So I agree there's a problem. What would I do? I would look at different options. I would talk to people. And to be honest, I don't know if you've seen this, but the Leeds City Council has actually got a plan for this specific green area. So this is one option. Like this junction is the end of Spencer Lane. If you were to make that into a walking and cycling friendly area, make it signalized, make it one way, you'd prevent the rat running. So I think that one thing, and it wouldn't be super costly. As it happens, Leeds City Council's put out a consultation to make some changes there. And people have been up in arms. There's been big pushback on it. I don't know what the status is, but to be honest, I saw the plans from Leeds City Council. If anyone works at Leeds City Council, specifically City Connect, credit to them. It's a bold plan. I think they plan to make it one way, and they plan to make it a lot safer. So obviously that is a start. There's a lot more that needs to be done, but I'd say traffic calming and specifically either making it one way or totally making this junction blocked for through traffic would be a quick win based on the evidence. So we can simulate it now. Yeah. Hopefully. Well, we'll find out. And you can actually simulate it using some of these free and online tools. So thanks a lot for the question. Great question. Right. So that's a big one. Okay. So am I right? So for anyone who didn't hear, this was Kit from Active Travel England, who I worked with while I was at Active Travel England. And if I understand correctly, it was how do we get the best of both worlds? We've got academic, what you call boffins, which I think is a bit, that's a bit harsh, but we're really into our work. And then you've got people who actually do stuff like in government. How do we bring them together to make it work? Because I agree, sometimes the academics are off doing their own thing, and then the policy people are doing their own thing, and they just sometimes come together, with the propensity cycle tool being one example, but generally they're not working together. It's a big question, and I think it's an important one. I think there are many things that we can do. So simplifying the contracting arrangement for civil service so that it's easier to commission academics, for starters, would be a quick win instead of always going to the same people. I think it takes two to tango. So academics can do stuff like organising events where policy people are specifically invited. And I can say before this event, we did a hackathon and we had representatives from the Department for Transport coming. So creating the incentives in government, and also it's about leadership in government. If I think people who are leading digital and data teams can create that space for their team to go out and explore ideas and kind of protect against the firefighting that is inevitable when you're working in government. So there are a couple of ideas, but very good question. Happy to take that forward and create more of these collaborations. Thanks, Kit.
Eamon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great question. So for the people online who didn't hear, this was a question about inclusivity. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was saying, how can we use this stuff to make transport systems, or the evidence first, and then eventually the transport systems that we're modeling more inclusive to people who maybe are on a wheelchair, for example. So great question. The first thing I'd say is most transport planners are privileged, often white men, to be honest. So, and in addition to that, the transport models are kind of locked in a closed room. So no one can look inside and ask questions about it. So I think going from being like just inside that room to putting it out there makes it open for scrutiny to allow people like yourself to ask questions. I think more specifically, like just taking this as one example, a lot of my work is focused on cycling, and it's not a huge leap in terms of the methods to go from planning for cycling to planning for wheeling. What's difficult is you need higher resolution data. So the problem with modeling walking and wheelchair use is you need the pavements, you need to know how wide they are, you need to know the curbs, and that level of detail is difficult. Like it's just big, messy, difficult to work with data, but it's definitely something that I want to do some more work on in the future. So yeah, great question. And there's a lot of work to do in that area.
Can we just try one online? There's one there.
Okay.
For you.
From Cameron Allen. Okay. So transport policy in my eyes is more about the politics rather than lack of data. How do you think data can help convince politicians to be brave? So I'm going to answer this question with reference to an image. So if you show politicians, if you just talk to them, often they won't listen. They'll think that you're coming with an agenda. But if you show them data, in my experience, you can engage them. And for good or bad, and personally I think good, they have a kind of pro-data bias. If you've got a model, then and some like fancy methods, they're more likely to listen, especially if they're statistically robust. And I think active travel specifically has suffered because we haven't had the big modeling investment. So the road people, HS2, literally spend millions of pounds on modeling, so they can outgun people pushing for more sustainable transport. So I guess we're trying to show, well, actually active travel has got the data and we've got the evidence as well. So yeah, I'm sure that transport, that these tools, it's not, you need political will as well, but used in the right way, the data and the methods can build that political support that we need. So that's my answer to your online question, Cameron. Thanks for a good question. Yeah. 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 So, well, I was running out of time, Brian. So the question was, what does NetGen mean? Okay. So, and I'll just go to the slide. So basically, like I deliberately didn't talk about what the propensity to cycle tool actually is because I've been told off before, including by some of the people in the audience, for being too technically detailed. So I wanted to keep it accessible. But basically, what the models one of the key things that these models do is they give you an estimate of the potential on the network. So obviously in Leeds, there's thousands of roads. How do you know which one to build on? Where do you spend your money? Difficult question. But if you can estimate the future demand for walking, let's say, then you can put the footpaths where there's most potential. So the idea is to generate that kind of model, not just for one city, not just for one country, as we did with the propensity to cycle tool or the network planning tool for Scotland, but in the same way that climate modelers do, you have a global model. That would take a bit more compute, but you have like a foundation layer that researchers worldwide can use. And by the way, there are people working on this, but I would love to operate at that global level. Yeah. 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 Yes, is the short answer. I feel another plug coming on. So to model the long distance travel, you need an estimate of long distance demand. And we don't actually know, other than the census, how far people travel or where they go. We get good indication from rail network data, but there's a big unanswered question about what the demand is, how many people are making that trip, and how that could change in the future. So myself and Malcolm Morgan, who can't be here in person, we are advertising a PhD on simulating that kind of long distance travel. So there's a spatial interaction modeling project where you can model that long distance demand. So there's a need for better spatial interaction models, to be honest. And then just to say, I fully agree. One of the big problems is the lack of cross-modal research. So I've done probably too much work at this point on cycling specifically, even though it's like very cost-effective way of reducing short distance car trips. But what's lacking is the dialogue between Network Rail and Active Travel England, like how many of those conversations have happened. And there's a need for better integration between active travel and public transport and in the models. And that's something that I would love to work on in the future. So maybe that's idea 4 you've just created there, Will. But yeah, good question. Thank you. Okay, what's the question? Say that again, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So the national transport model. Okay, it's quite a specific question. The UK uses the national transport model for a lot of long-term transport planning investment programs. How do we tackle it? I do think there is movement in that area. So the Department for Transport is in the process of commissioning a 5-minute traffic model that can generate an answer in 5 minutes. So it's a lot more iterative. I don't know who's going to solve that problem. I would be very happy to be involved in conversations and the solution, but it's a tough cookie to crack, that one. So yeah, hard question. Sorry, that's not a very detailed answer.
Malcolm's busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
To what extent do you feel that the national government uses research to play action?
Well, I've got a kind of controversial answer there. You should ask some of my colleagues in ITS who are working on different aspects of the transport system. One thing that I can say is when we had the celebration, was it for the 50th year anniversary, there was a little bit of tension between some of the new school transport modelers who are researching transport decarbonisation and people who were building the economic case for road building. I think a lot of it's historic. I would say the vast majority of transport planning professionals nowadays fully are on board and understand the science of why we need to decarbonize and reduce dependency on cars. So I see a lot of it is like inertia. So I think they're using a lot of historical research, but from what I can see, most of the current research is all in the right direction. Yeah, if you want to follow on.
Actually, really what's happening.
Right.
Used to be the search.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I think I understand the question. So the question is, for anyone who didn't hear, who isn't in person, was, do you think that academic research is being used as an excuse by the government as an alternative to action? So you just commission another report instead of actually doing the thing. I don't think that the research itself is the cause of the delay. I think you've got political aversion to doing things, and then it's like maybe a political maneuver of, oh, we can do a report and it feels like you're getting something done. I agree with that. And I think there is actually a point about the civil service and civil servants. It's easier to commission a report and tell a minister that we're commissioning a report than to say, we just need to do the thing. I don't think it's academics' fault, but I think academics maybe play into that and they're a little bit naive and over optimistic about which of their ideas is actually going to get implemented. But I think it's a good point, but I don't think it's academic research at fault here. That's a great question. Everything's easier. We've got way bigger computers, we've got way more data, and we can disaggregate. So yeah, there's a lot of methodological developments that have happened. And I would say overall things have got a lot easier. One thing that hasn't got better, which has actually got worse, is available national travel demand data. So the propensity to cycle tool heavily used the 2011 census data. That's what like really out of date now. And unfortunately, the update to that was affected by COVID. So we don't have good open demand data at high spatial resolution. And this, I didn't talk about it because of time, but this in Spain, they have to some extent solved this problem by generating an open access origin destination data set derived from mobile telephone data. And I think they are leading, like as a nationally, they're the first country to have opened up such a data set. And I think that should happen in the UK and other countries as well. So most things have got easier, but access to good origin destination data hasn't got easier, which is partly why we are currently advertising a PhD position to improve spatial interaction models. So another plug, sorry. Yeah, okay. So, okay, so how important is opinion data in these big models? So they don't, like that data doesn't exist in the propensity to cycle tool. They can be included in the model through the uptake functions. So if you want to predict what active travel levels could be or what the potential for change is, your options are stated preference or revealed preference. So that's your that's your attitudinal data, and you can encapsulate that into models, and that is in there. I think that could be a good place to improve models, is including more attitudinal data. So at the moment, it's other than in the question of what's the potential for change, it's generally ignored in the big models. But I think there's big potential to improve models in that space. Whether or not it's like the top priority, I'm not sure, but I'm certainly interested in that way of improving models.
I want to know what watching. Right at the back over there.
Can you try pressing the button? Because it might, the mic might just work. Right? So just speak loud. Yeah. So that's a good question. So I can actually move around and have mics, so that's good. The question was, what do you say to people who are interested at some point in selling their tools and making money from it, or just like getting by and what's the word, like paying the bills for doing their work? So it's a very good question. One thing I can say for sure is, if you are in the UK market and many other national markets, you are probably at a big advantage if your work is open source, because national government has a remit to prioritize tools that are open. In the Department for Transport, that is seen as a priority. In Active Travel England, it is seen as a good thing. And also, if your work is open, it's the best advertising ever, because people can use it, they can see it, it's visible, and it's basically free marketing. So in the current world, I think the reason that people are slow to shift is actually more cultural. And if you're looking to grow a startup transport planning consultancy, you're more likely to succeed if you have an open first model. I did say before, it's not like you're fully open or you're fully closed. You could open up some component of it that gets popular, that gets you the marketing, and then keep some secret source closed, which is what the big tech companies like Google and Microsoft do. So if it works for them, I'm sure it can work for you as well. So does that answer your question? Yeah.
Question, but he said just wants his dad. So we've got one. Two.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's a really great question, Tice. And for anyone who doesn't know, Tice is my office mate. So this is something I'm sure we can talk about in the office some more. But the question was, how can we use data science to support bolder visions? And my first thought is, the vision itself has nothing to do with data science. You need imagination, and you need ideas, and you need the people who are not your usual suspects to be generating the ideas. And that idea generation process can come from anywhere. I strongly believe that the visions that people come up with will be much more powerful, have much more impact if they are implemented with good data science, because if not, then you could say, well, we're all just going to use flying machines, or we'll just teleport around. Like, it has to be based on physical reality. So a specific example is in the image where you've got 50% of road space being reallocated to roads. So I think it's okay to be it's good to be bold, but data science can help make that vision more specific and operational. So I think it's got a huge role to play, and I fully agree that there's a tendency for transport models to repeat their current transport systems, and that's something that my work is trying to move beyond. So yeah, good question to end on, I think. Hopefully, be bold.
Thanks, Robin. And I think you all agree we've had a really interesting lecture by Robin, a good long discussion afterwards, and as Kit looks his dad, we better head back to ITS and see if there's any drink. Thank you, Robin.